Got it. Okay. Today in class, we have about 20 minutes or so left, a little less than that, 15 minutes, and we're going to do a sort of high-level overview of things and very little super detailed technical stuff today. But again, your lab Friday, we're going to be going over a lot of technical things, a lot of what I call these sharp edges of your homework assignment. And so my strong recommendation is that before lab on Friday, you start this homework assignment, and in particular, do the first two sections, this project setup and Docker section. And then in the lab, we will together go through this Postgres section, and I'll make sure that everybody has that working, and so that you'll actually be able to complete the homework. Normally, so far, many students have sort of been coming in and out of lab late, which is totally acceptable. In general, my philosophy is that you all should do what's most effective for you, and if sleeping in an extra 5 minutes is the best thing for you all, then that's fine with me. But I strongly recommend tomorrow that you come to lab on time, because otherwise you will be behind on the stuff that we're going through. It'll be sort of like a half lecture-ish, half lab-ish sort of thing, where I'm doing stuff on the front that everybody else wants to be following along with to work on your homework. So strongly recommend, again, completing these sections and getting to lab on time. Any questions about what to do before Friday, tomorrow? Okay. Today, we're going to cover a bunch of this background material in these lecture notes that will be sort of assumed knowledge for this homework tutorial. And this, again, is sort of like what our working environment is going to be for the rest of the semester, where we're working inside of a database trying to run our data analysis commands. We're getting the whole sort of environment set up so that we will have access to that database. We're going to be, again, setting up this Instagram tech stack. And so today in lecture, we're just going over what is this Instagram tech stack. The first thing to highlight is that this is all going to be related to what programmers affectionately call boring or old technology. So some people might think those are bad things, but this is actually a good thing in the programming world to use boring or old technology. And there's some famous posts on, if you've ever seen news.ycombinator.com, Hacker News before, a place where programmers hang out, famous post here about choose boring technology, linked right here, recommend you take a look at it. And you can get some, intuition about why people like the boring technology. The shell is an example of one of these boring technologies that has been with us for 50 years, and that's why the language has all these weird warts that we're talking about, but it's literally only getting more popular with time. And programmers often talk about this thing called the Lindy effect, where the idea is that technologies that have existed for a long time are very likely to continue existing for a long time, and new technologies are almost always going to go extinct, similar to how new startup companies are almost always going to go extinct. And the very first day in class, we did this Pokemon or big data website, looked at that a little bit. And the idea of this, that it's a joke that nobody can recognize all of these new big data things because these concepts or these technologies just come and go and nobody cares. They disappear and nobody cares. So one thing that students often want to do is focus on like these new buzzwords that they've seen that, but really the thing that's going to last you throughout your career are these old boring technologies. And so that's what we're going to talk about this week and what Instagram and many other companies are based on. There are, so this 12-factor web app is a famous website, sort of textbookish thing about how to design a good system. I won't have any concrete readings for you from this, but this is the sort of thing that people will ask like your opinion of at an interview, what you think of 12-factor web apps. And so if you think you might be working on like web sort of stuff at some point in your career, definitely recommend you look through this to be able to have some sort of informed opinion on that. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit of history of these tech stacks and what people are currently using. So the most famous tech stack in history is called this LAMP tech stack. And the services that people are using in this tech stack are Linux as the operating system. Apache is the name of a web server, so that's this A over here. And then MySQL is this database system that stores all the data. The database system, from our perspective as a data science class, is the most important part of this tech stack. And MySQL, back in the day, was the most popular of these databases. So this LAMP tech stack was really popular in about the 90s. And MySQL was really the only database that people used at that point. Today, there's this other database called Postgres, and Postgres existed at the same time as MySQL back in the 90s. But Postgres has always had more emphasis on correctness and actually what we call data integrity, so that if you put something in the database, it's guaranteed to actually exist there when you try to recover it. MySQL does not focus on that. MySQL has always focused on speed more than correctness. And for what I call or think of as webby websites like Facebook, if you press like a like button, nobody really cares if a month from now Facebook forgets whether you press that like button. And so MySQL is sort of like good enough maybe for Facebook, but Postgres we'll see has more data integrity guarantees, and so it's guaranteed not to lose data at all. And so these days, even though Postgres is slower, machines are so much faster that Postgres is now becoming sort of the standard database that everybody's using. And again, Instagram is based off of Postgres. And so it's, if somebody's ever questioning you, like, why would you use Postgres? An easy answer is that if it's good enough for Instagram, it's good enough for me. The programming language that people used back in the day was PHP back in the 90s, but Python is mostly overcome PHP in popularity for web programming. Another sort of famous internet discussion area, if you haven't seen it before, this one is a very old one back from the 90s, is Slashdot. You can see how, if you wanted to get information about how Facebook actually runs its LAMP tech stack, you could visit this website. Slashdot's the sort of thing that older programmers, sort of like my generation, would be familiar with. And if again, in sort of like this culture fit sort of thing inside of companies, if somehow like Slashdot comes up, you want to at least be aware of that, that's a thing, that exists. Okay, as opposed to the LAMP tech stack, the competing tech stack through the 90s was this thing called the WIMP tech stack, which was it's the Microsoft version of the LAMP tech stack. This is sort of the acronym that people came up with in order to make fun of it because it was really bad at the time. A little bit better now, but still not, or still in my opinion, pretty bad. But at the time it was very bad. So the W Windows IIS was the name of Microsoft's web server, still using MySQL and PHP for the programming. But today, actually, nobody uses Windows, not even Microsoft uses Windows. You can see that over half of their servers run on Linux. The only major website that people that you've probably heard of that runs on Windows is the StackOverflow.com website. The CEO of Stack Overflow was a former project manager at Microsoft, and so that's why they use Stack Overflow when he developed things, because that's what he was familiar with, and he got lots of good deals from Microsoft in order to do that. But literally nobody else on any website that you've ever heard of runs Windows. Even Bing uses Linux. Even Outlook.com uses this thing called FreeBSD, which is like Linux. Another reason at the time nobody used Windows, or that Windows has this really bad reputation in this web server world, is that there were three like very famous security vulnerabilities. Each one of these three took out the entirety of the internet for about a week or two at a time, even non-Windows servers, because of security vulnerabilities in Windows and IIS. So you hear people talking about these things and making fun of Windows for it. That brings us to the Instagram tech stack, and this has sort of become the standard of what people are using today. So Instagram has a really good engineering blog where they talk about all the things that they do. So this is from 2011, where we're getting this information from. And they have this picture over here that roughly describes what's going on. So I'll switch over here so we can talk about this picture a little bit. In these boxes down here, these are the different services that Instagram uses in its back end. There's this larger box up here talking about the web service idea, and then the bottom down here, the database. Instagram does not expose its database to the public internet. Very few companies do. Instead, they have some sort of web service that sits in between the internet and the database. There's each of these boxes, smaller boxes, is the way to think about it is like a Docker container that is running somewhere in their cloud infrastructure. At the time when Instagram was first created, they were running on AWS, but since then Facebook has purchased them and they have migrated from AWS to Facebook's internal infrastructure. Again, one of the good reasons for using Docker is it makes migration between different cloud services very, very easy and straightforward. So here they have each of these different web servers down here. These are like the web servers that you built in last week's homework using Flask and Docker, where each one of these containers is one of these web servers. You see that I have more than one listed because they have many people connecting to Instagram at once, and so they'll need many different web servers running at once. Very, very easy to do in Docker. If I come over just really quickly, I'm logged into the Lambda server over here inside of this same Flask web folder that we had before. I'm going to open up the docker compose.yaml file and just show you how to add more services of the same type. You can type scale : and then 10 like this. And now when I do docker compose up, it's going to create 10 of these exact same services right here instead of just one. So Docker Compose, again, makes it very easy to change how many services you have running, and you can change this number based on how much load you currently have on your website. The upcoming homework will have you doing things like that, changing how many web servers that you have in order to sort of scale your website. One of the advantages, again, about Docker being idempotent or ephemeral is that it makes this sort of scaling easy. Yeah, Abizer? I'm going to pause you for a second. The question is about ports, and the things are going to get much more confusing in our new infrastructure setup because we have this thing up here called a load balancer. The load balancer is the only thing that gets exposed to the public internet. So the load balancer is going to be the only thing that you'll have to worry about the ports with in the Docker Compose file. The load balancer decides when a new connection comes in. It has all of these different web servers that it knows about, and it's going to decide which one of those web servers is currently not being used or has low utilization and forward the web request to that particular web server. The configuration for all this will get very complicated. You'll have to be very careful with all the ports that you're working with, and but the tutorial will go over that. The load balancer thing that we'll be using is called Nginx. This Nginx right here is Nginx. And then we'll be using Flask and a thing called Gunicorn on these web servers down here. And these will be connecting to the database, which will be a Postgres database. And all of these things, again, different services inside of your Docker Compose file. On Instagram at the time in 2011, they had 3 of these Nginx load balancers running, 25 web servers running. They were using at the time this system called Django. It's still fairly popular today, although Flask, what we're using, is more popular at this point. So 25 of these web servers. And then down here in their database level, 1 of these PG Bouncer instances and 12 different Postgres databases actually serving the data. These are generally the most expensive services to run, the largest compute, largest hardware, and these web services, everything else, usually fairly cheap to run. It's usually bottlenecked by your database. Yeah, so I don't know, some last sort of fun notes about Nginx here. It's currently the world's #1 web server. I have that link opened here somewhere. Maybe I don't. It's currently the world's most popular web server. It's actually a Russian company. It's the only non-American company that I know of, really, that has main beating out American competitors, both technically and socially on something. And at the time in 2019, they were raided by the Russian police because there were many web servers using Nginx that were hosting anti-Putin sort of stuff, and Russia didn't like that. And so popularity has been going down a little bit since then because of perceived political pressure on them, but still the most popular. This is a good place for us to stop for today. Again, on Friday, we'll go over the first part of this tutorial, and that'll get you familiar with all of these services and how they work together to host our data. If anybody has any questions about anything, this or the quiz or anything else, I'll stick around, answer those questions. I also have office hours today, so I will happy to answer whatever you have now. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow at our lab.
Yeah, just a general question for the Git versus GitHub. So the Git remote add, is that a function for any application like GitHub and